Hello, everyone. This is Joelle Fawcett, and welcome back to episode 15 of the Soul Method podcast.
Life is a winding road, no telling where it goes. Driving through days and nights, won't stop for traffic.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back. I am Joelle Fawcett, and I am the host and founder of the Soul Method and the Soul Method podcast. And here, our mission is to be your guide to heal from the past, be at peace in the present, and create a future you love. And welcome to episode 15 of the Soul Method podcast, titled Run into the Roar. In today's episode, we are talking about your fears, what makes you angry, what makes you frustrated, what flat out pisses you off, and why those feelings exist. So, to get started, let me ask you a question. Do you know how lions hunt? Yes, I mean like the big cats on the plains in Africa, lions. Do you know how lions hunt? Well, obviously, lions live in tribes. They aren't solo creatures by nature, and they hunt as a pack, which is a part of what gives them their strength and fierceness. And yes, the women do the heavy lifting here, the majority of it anyway. So sorry, guys. In the big cat world, we ladies are fierce. When lions hunt, they will identify as a tribe whatever animals they wish to kill, they want to eat. So let's say in this example, it's a group of gazelle grazing on the grasslands. They slowly sneak up on the gazelle. The element of surprise is the only way that this is really going to work. The older or ill members of the tribe, and maybe a male or two, will circle around one side of the prey, while the huntresses will circle around the other side. They will wait until every member of the tribe is in exactly the right place. A quiet will fall across the African plain. The buzzing of flies can be heard as the sun presses on the scene. At just the right moment, the older members of the tribe let out a vicious roar, and terrified, the gazelle react out of fear and immediately run away from the perceived threat right into the mouths of the real hunters. Now, here's the analogy. Freedom in our lives works exactly the same way for us as it does for those gazelle. Whatever terrifies you, whatever freezes you up, scares you, makes you irritated, frustrated, angry, and triggers all of that junk from your past that you are doing everything in your being not to feel, those things are your path to freedom. So, yes, you heard me correctly. The way out is through. And the closer you get, the deeper you go. What looks like and sounds like a terrifying lion inside of you dissolves into harmless noise. Whenever we come up against an obstacle, whether it's physical, emotional, or spiritual, we always have a choice. So if you're sitting out there listening to this and you believe that you don't have choices in your life and you believe that you are victim to what's going on around you, go ahead and turn this off now. It's not for you. You aren't going to be able to connect to this because the basis of this philosophy is that we all, as adults, once you hit 18 here in America, we always have a choice We can choose when an obstacle comes up in our life to be blocked by it by either ignoring the pain, stuffing it down, removing the quote unquote toxic person from our lives, or we can advance through the obstacle by running into the roar. So, where does this roar come from, you may ask? And I'm sure you can all think about the last time someone said something to you or something happened in your life and you felt that twinge inside of you. You felt the emotion come up, whether you were frustrated at work, somebody was kind of irritating to you on your drive to pick up your kids from school. Somebody said something offhand and it brought up something from your childhood that really irked you. We all can probably think of something that happened within the past 24 hours, right? And if you can't think of something that has happened within the past 24 hours, please tell me where you are and what planet you're living on, because I'd like to join you. So, where does it come from? Like, why do we react to things that happen? Because let's take the example of a car cutting you off on the road. Okay. You're driving to work, you're running a little late. You're getting a little tense because you're down to the minutes, and then a car jumps in front of you on the road. Now, here's the reality. That car, whoever's driving it, they don't know you, right? It's not personal. They don't know you. They are doing them. And the only thing that happened is the car moved from point A to point B, which happened to be in front of you, right? The fact of the matter is that this should not be an emotional thing. But the next thing you know, you're cursing out their mom, their dog, and their parrot because they moved their car from point A to point B, right? Why? Why do we take the things that happen around us, make them mean all sorts of things about us, say a lot of things, and have all of that emotion build up inside of us? That's the roar. That's the roar that I'm talking about. Where does it come from? So that roar is coming out of emotional trauma. And this is the stuff that has been stored up over time. And I really, really want to be clear here because I think the word trauma has like a stigma attached to it. Like if you've been traumatized, then you went through you had to go through like a detox program, or you had to see a therapist, or you had something really, really terrible happen to you in your life. And do I think the majority of people on the planet have a lot of junk that happened to them? Yeah. And I also believe that even if your childhood was pretty perfect, right? Maybe you won the lottery. You got parents that were emotionally supportive. They funded your dreams. You grew up with friends who loved you. Like you literally hit the childhood jackpot. If you are that person, and if you are, God bless you. Use all of those gifts to your strengths to bring awesome things to this world. Even if you are that person, though, no one makes it through childhood without storing up some kind of emotional trauma. Okay. It is a part of being human. No one makes it through childhood without storing up that emotional trauma, because the moment we learn language is the moment that ego is activated in our minds. And I've talked about this before. Now, obviously, there are levels to trauma. And an amazing woman, a mentor of mine, spiritual leader, teacher, and author, Gabrielle Bernstein, writes about this in her new book, Happy Days, where she talks about how she really kind of wants to blow the lid off of this word trauma, because we all recognize the concept of trauma with a big T, trauma, because they make movies about it, right? They make movies about people who have been through horrific things in their life, and most of the time they overcome them. So we're very familiar with those. And so when we don't have those big things happen to us, we're not sexually abused by a family member. We're not in a war zone. We're not losing loved ones at too early of an age. We're not dealing with extreme sickness, right? So when we don't have these big things happen to us, we think that we're not traumatized. We think that we don't store up the junk. And then most of the time, we wind up blaming ourselves for feeling kind of off at any point in our lives. But trauma can take many different forms. It can be something as simple as a teacher saying that you can't do something or that you're stupid, or your older brother or sister that you admire calling you ugly. Or maybe one day that amazingly emotionally stable mom that you grew up with wasn't so emotionally stable. And even these little things, as children, we can create stories with. And we store these things up over time. And I'm assuming you're an adult listening to this and you know that in the adult world, those little things happen way more often. So let's remove the stigma from that term trauma. It is simply a part of being human. And what trauma means is that something happened in your life. Your ego, or that little voice in your head, made up a story about it that relates to you. You believed the thing that was said to you. You believed you were ugly. You believed you were stupid. You believed you were unlovable or unworthy. And then you started to live out of that place. And the moment something in our current lives touches that wound inside of us, that belief that we are unlovable or unworthy or that we cannot be happy, that's a trigger. And in a desperate attempt to protect ourselves, we often react out of fear, anger, or frustration and experience anxiety around anything that could potentially bring that belief up to the surface. And our culture teaches us to run away from triggering events. It teaches us to run away from the roar and more often to drown it in sugar, alcohol, or any other addictive substance like cell phone use. Anyone? We all experience this roar inside of us, this reaction when one of our beliefs are triggered. And I truly believe that it is only through the growth process that comes through facing the shadows of our emotional selves that we even have the opportunity to grow into the people we are designed to be here on the planet. So let's get into this. Because here's the fact: while each obstacle or roar is seemingly unique to us, the trauma response that they elicit within us as human beings all boils down to fear. We must rewrite the purpose of pain and fear. Pain and fear are not bad. I'm going to say that again. Pain and fear, anxiety, frustration, anger, all of these emotions are not bad. They're not negative. They simply are an emotion. There is nothing within an emotion that is dangerous. I'm going to say that one again too. There is nothing within an emotion that is dangerous. And if you really want to get into that topic, go ahead and listen to the episode titled The Banana Experiment. Because it doesn't matter how big an emotion is, how loud an emotion is, the reality is that there is nothing within that that is dangerous. It is simply big and loud. Your fear and your pain have a purpose. The purpose of your fear, of the darkest parts of yourself, is to guide you home. All of these things that we feel, are clues. Now, looking at this, when we have a trauma response to something, someone says something to us, it reminds us of what our dad used to say to us all the time, and immediately we feel the flare come up within us, and we say, that person is a problem in my life and I don't want them around anymore. Right? You've probably experienced something like that, where one of your friends always kind of gets under your skin. You start to feel annoyed, you feel frustrated, and suddenly we're labeling them as a toxic person, someone we don't want to be around. And I'm just going to use that as an example and look at it from this perspective. If you want to achieve peace in the face of something you perceive to be a problem, like this person in your life, we must first understand why you perceive this situation to be a problem in the first place. And that is the start of peeling back the layers. Why do you feel triggered? Why are these emotions coming up for you? Why do you perceive this to be a problem? And if we can shift the perspective to look inward rather than outward, because the reality is the way you're feeling has nothing to do with that other person. That other person is just doing them. And there are plenty of other people who love being around that person. They think they're fun. They think they're ridiculous. They think they're hysterical. But for some reason, you're feeling frustrated and anxious. It has nothing to do with them. Look at why you're feeling the way that you are. Now, again, our culture does not teach us to do this. Our culture teaches us to label the person as toxic or annoying and then avoid them so that we don't have to look at what's going on underneath. There's a brilliant book called The Obstacle is the Way by a man named Ryan Holiday. And he says in there, quote, "We have a choice about how we respond to any situation. We can be blindly led by the primal feelings, the primal reaction, AKA fight, flight, or freeze, or we can understand them and learn to filter them. Discipline and perception lets you clearly see the advantage and proper course of action in every situation without the pestilence of panic and fear." End quote. We need to shift the way that we're looking at the emotions in our lives, the purpose of them, and start to get curious with ourselves. The roar is your way out. Now, one thing I will say is you all know that that roar that you're running from or that's standing in your way, it's not going anywhere on its own. Y'all know that, right? Like, it doesn't matter how many shoes you buy, how many times you get your nails done, how many cans of beer you drink, how much cake you eat, or how much time you spend on Facebook. The way that you're feeling will not go away on its own. It will always try to surface. And the fact of the matter is that if you're doing things in your life to avoid that roar, to avoid the pain and fear and anxiety that you feel, that roar is running your life. Now, this fact is why I don't believe in boundaries, according to the traditional term of boundaries. Most people use boundaries as a protective space around them so that they never actually have to look at themselves. So this is like, if I have a childhood wound around a door slamming, let's say I grew up in a house where there was a lot of door slamming, and then I'm around somebody who slams doors at my office, if I'm not willing to look at what that brings up in me, I'm going to call that other person angry and destructive and set a quote unquote boundary that they can't be around me when I work. That's not a real boundary. That's called codependency. That's me saying to this other person, I need you to be a certain way so that I can feel peaceful inside. Because the moment you slam that door, it brings something up for me, and that's really uncomfortable for me, and I don't want to look at that. Okay, that's not actually a boundary. Again, that is codependency. The door slamming in that situation is actually an invitation for me. That is an invitation for me to run into the roar of my own story around door slamming. And instead of making it mean that I'm in danger or that something bad is going to happen, I instead can say, oh, it's actually just a piece of wood making noise on another piece of wood, right? But more often than not, rather than processing through our own fear and pain, we avoid the roar by creating these codependent relationships where we only associate with people who stay away from the pain points in our lives. The moment someone triggers us, we call them things, we call them toxic, destructive, angry, whatever, and we set those quote unquote boundaries. All right, I'm blowing the lid off of that. Those are not boundaries. Another way to think about this roar inside of you is your conscience. We've all heard stories, fairy tales, or have people in our lives who have done this. And I'm just as guilty of it as everybody else, where we start out with maybe a little white lie, saying yes when we mean no, or no when we mean yes. And it starts us down a path. And the farther we get down the path, the ickier it feels. And it feels ickier and ickier because our alignment is calling out to us. Our conscience is calling out to us, and that roar gets louder. We see this in movies all the time where finally the main character just can't take it anymore and comes clean with whatever it is that they haven't been completely truthful with. And always the reason why they do that, why they feel so compelled to do that in the end, is because they cannot deny being honest. And they can't deny that roar inside of them that is their call back to authenticity. And to be honest, you guys, right now, I have someone in my life who is kind of far down the rabbit hole with this, where they've gotten to the point of being so inauthentic that they're starting to avoid the people in their lives. They're starting to not answer the phone. They're starting to go down this path of, rather than being honest with their friends and their family about what's going on in their life, instead they're avoiding them. And the farther you go down that path, the harder it is to come back, because then you have to face it. You have to go into it and face all of those emotions. And again, there is nothing inside of those emotions that are scary. And the reality is that 9 times out of 10 with the people around us, once we own our roar, once we own the mistake, we own the junk and come clean, people are usually really willing to forgive us, even if that takes them a little bit of time. Now, again, at the time, that can seem like absolutely the most terrifying thing in the world. And so our culture teaches us this way of avoidance, where instead of looking at it and going through it, we hide it. We swallow it down, we stuff it down, and we soldier on pretending that we're okay. And like I said, that roar inside of you will get louder the longer you ignore it or block it, because your authentic self will always call to you to live your most actualized life. That's a fact. We can all, as a human race, relate to the experience of having a conscience. And if you can't, well, we look at historical figures who seem to not have a conscience and we call them psychos, right? Those are the people like Hitler who were okay with killing multitudes of people, right? Those are the people who go down in history books as labeled as psychopaths because they're so disconnected with their authentic selves. So Even if you say you don't have a conscience, I have a feeling that if you labeled it something else that's more resonated with you and where you're at, you would relate to that experience of being called to live your authentic life. And we all have this compass that wants to call us home. And in this process of running into the roar, being called home as human beings, we are allowed to grow and blossom and build up the strength and the fortitude to become the people we are truly meant to be in this world. The roar is an alarm system. It is a conversation your authenticity wants to have with you. Now, for those of you who have listened to episode 1 of this podcast, you know that I experienced this in my own life as well. How I said yes to so many things along the way that were completely out of alignment with myself. But I said yes because of all of the childhood trauma that had built up over my years of life. I said yes because I wanted to fit in, because I wanted to be loved, because I wanted to feel worthy, because I wanted to do the quote unquote right thing. And then I wound up nearly a decade later living a life that, number one, I didn't recognize myself. And number two, I woke up completely lackluster and without joy. And it's not to say anything against my ex husband or the life that I was living. It's not like it was wrong or horrible or bad. It's not like I was living on the street or doing some crazy, horrible things. It just wasn't a good fit for me. And so always keep an eye on that too. Just because something is great does not mean it's great for you. And that life that I was living was a great life. It just wasn't great for me. Now, in the end, let's be really clear about this. It can never be somebody else's responsibility to resolve, release, or heal the pain. Okay? No one else can run into the roar for you. It's not their job to create peace for you. That's your responsibility. So let me ask you, where is the roar in your life? Where do you feel pressure, pain, fear, or frustration? Is there someone in your life who's constantly irritating you or someone you're avoiding? That is a huge clue. And remember, the irritation, the frustration, all those feelings that come up for you have nothing to do with the other person. It has to do with you. Be willing to peel back the onion layers and look into why. Change your perception and get curious with yourself. What's underneath of there? And you might be surprised at what you find. Only when we are being accountable and responsible for our own emotional state will we find freedom. Only when we are running into the roar of our lives, we are peeling back the onion layers, we are getting curious with ourselves, and we are diving inward, can we live our biggest life outward. In one of the types of yoga that I do, it's called booty yoga. And no, booty doesn't stand for your butt, although I think you'll have a very nice butt if you practice booty yoga. Buti, booty is a Sanskrit word that means the cure to something hidden. And one of their foundational principles that I absolutely love is the principle that you can only be as spiritual as you are grounded. And this concept works the same way horizontally and vertically as it does inward and outward. You can only press your authentic self as far outwards into the world as you are willing to go deep into yourself. Your pain and fear will lead you to freedom. It will lead you to joy. Follow it. They are your map. They are the clues along the journey that will lead you to a life that's more amazing than you ever thought possible. Now, when I'm coaching clients, these pain points are where we start. and they become my roadmap as well when I'm working with somebody. We pick a trail and we go deep. We go deep into that part, whatever the pain point is. And often we wind up somewhere completely unrelated to where we started, beyond the trail of emotions that lead back to some triggering event in childhood. As we bring this episode to a close, let me ask you, how are you guys doing? Do you have pain points in your life or triggers that come up for you often? Are you experiencing anxiety or frustration on the daily basis? Like, what would your life actually look like if you no longer walked around afraid of feeling the uncomfortable things? What would it look like? Because here's the thing, as human beings, we naturally avoid feeling uncomfortable. We avoid feeling tired, hungry, sick, right? We avoid feeling irritated, frustrated. I think if our primal nature had its way, we would arrive at death fully rested, very fat, and passing off into another peaceful sleep, right? But that's not the way the world works. We are here to grow and to be refined. And the way that we are refined as human beings is by running into the roar, running into all of those things so that they can dissolve around us. Thank you all so much for being here with me today. As always, I am here for you and I would love to hear from you. You can hit me up on the Facebook page for the Soul Method, which is at the Soul Method Yoga, or email me at Joelle, Joelle, at the.SoL.method.com. And if you would like to book a coaching session with me or talk a little bit more about these topics to see if coaching is a good option for you, I would love to have that conversation with you. Just shoot me an email and I'll send you my phone number. And with that, folks, I hope you all have an amazing rest of your day. Until next time.
Life is a winding road, no telling where it goes. Driving through days and nights, won't stop for traffic.